Throughout human history, agriculture has never been limited to open fields under perfect sunlight. People have grown food in castle courtyards, between narrow stone alleys, beneath forest canopies, under monastic cloisters, and in densely packed ancient cities where sunlight rarely fell directly. In many of these places, shade wasn't a barrier, it was an advantage. Crops that would scorch or bolt in full sun thrived in the cooler, gentler light. When you study historical farming methods, you find an entire category of vegetables that outperform classic sun crops precisely because they evolved in low-light environments and prefer steady temperatures over full exposure. Today, the same principles matter more than ever. Urban growers deal with tall buildings blocking the sun. Suburban gardeners encounter shaded fences and neighbouring trees. Controlled growing environments and hydroponics often rely on low-intensity lighting. Instead of forcing sun crops into conditions they're unsuited for, it's far more efficient to choose crops that reward shade with greater yield, better flavour, and longer harvest windows. These 10 vegetables aren't just shade-tolerant. They routinely outperform their sun-loving counterparts in environments where heat and direct rays would ruin the harvest. Lettuce becomes sweeter and more productive in shade than in direct sun. Lettuce has a long history in shaded European courtyards where heat would have destroyed tender leaves. Shade prevents bitterness, slows bolting, and allows continuous leaf harvests. A practical application today is planting lettuce along the north or east sides of structures. In hydroponics, growers often use very low-intensity LEDs or ambient room light. The result is crisp leaves and consistent yields long after sun-exposed lettuce has collapsed. Spinach thrives in low temperatures and low light, often outperforming those beds that are exposed to full sun. You see, spinach actually evolved in cooler regions where the sunlight was diffused, and it responds rather poorly to heat stress. In shaded gardens, spinach tends to produce thicker leaves and continues growing well into the warmer seasons. A simple technique, really, is to sow your spinach where taller crops will cast afternoon shade. Indoors, even a modest LED strip is quite sufficient. This sort of setup can increase your total harvest, especially when compared to sun-grown spinach, which tends to bolt rather quickly. Kale, interestingly enough, produces higher quality leaves in indirect light than it does under harsh sun. Its origins in foggy coastal zones make it exceptionally well adapted to shade. Direct sunlight often toughens the leaves, while shade helps maintain their tenderness and really brings out that mineral-rich flavour. Growers can simply place kale behind taller plants, alongside fences or in partially covered areas. With consistent watering, kale can supply you with months of harvest without suffering the stress that sun-grown varieties so often face. Swiss chard continues producing for a longer period in shaded environments than it does in full exposure. Historically, Swiss chard was actually favoured in monastery gardens, where the walls cast long shadows throughout the day. Shade allows chard to maintain moisture and regenerate after repeated cuttings. A practical approach for today's growers is to plant chard on the north sides of raised beds, or under the partial canopy of fruit trees. For those using hydroponic methods, large leaves can be achieved with only moderate lighting, saving power while also increasing growth duration. Arugula, really intensifies in flavour and extends its harvest window when grown in shade. On the other hand, arugula becomes too mild and wilts quite easily in intense sun. Shade, interestingly, stabilises moisture levels and actually strengthens its peppery character. In a north-facing garden, arugula can be grown densely in shallow soil and trimmed weekly. This method, in fact, produces more cumulative yield than arugula exposed to full sun, which often becomes stringy and bolts early. Mustard greens, well, they regenerate faster in shade than in sun-stressed beds. Historically, mustard greens thrived in shaded mountain terraces where heat was really quite limited. Low-light environments tend to encourage rapid regeneration after cutting. A grower today can easily establish a cut-and-come-again system simply by harvesting the outer leaves regularly. Shade keeps the plant cool enough to continue producing new growth without interruption. Green onions, interestingly enough, outperform sun crops because they require minimal light to stay productive. Traditionally, green onions were grown near cellar doors, in shaded alleys, and at the edges of barns, all due to their low light needs. These environments help maintain moisture and prevent leaf scorching. Modern growers can plant them densely in shaded containers and harvest continually. Hydroponic growers, in fact, often use green onions as their lowest light crop, producing near constant yields with almost no lighting input. Cabbage, forms tighter, firmer heads in cooler, shaded conditions. There's a reason cabbage has always been associated with those cloudy northern climates. Shade actually prevents the heads from splitting and allows for slow, controlled formation. When planted in partial or even full shade, cabbage often produces more reliable harvests than those sun-exposed heads that, tend to overheat. The key, really, is firm soil and steady moisture. Shade ensures stability and reduces weather-related stress. Peas, interestingly enough, produce pods reliably in shade where sun crops might fail entirely. They evolved in moderate cloudy climates and use light quite efficiently. In shaded gardens, peas continue flowering and podding even when sun-loving vegetables stall. A trellis installed along a shaded building wall or fence works rather well. Peas benefit from the cooler air temperatures and diffuse light, and quite often they produce heavier pod sets than when exposed to harsh heat. Beets deliver abundant greens and consistent roots in low-light zones. Although roots grow faster with sunlight, beets do not require it to produce valuable harvests. Shade produces lush, nutrient-dense greens and steady, if slightly slower, root development. Historically, beet greens served as an essential survival food during shortages. For modern growers, placing beets in shaded beds ensures a constant supply of greens, while still producing usable roots over time. These crops demonstrate a truth older than modern agriculture. Shade is not wasted space. It is a different ecosystem with its own set of champions. In historical gardens, shaded areas were often the most reliable zones because they provided cool, stable conditions when sun-exposed crops suffered. Today, whether you're growing in narrow urban gardens beneath trees on the north side of your home or in low-light hydroponic systems, these shade-strong vegetables offer unmatched reliability and performance. For more historically grounded growing strategies, hydroponic insights, and off-grid food knowledge, subscribe to Hydrohaven and share this guide with anyone who wants to turn their darkest corners into their most productive assets.